Okay, hello everyone. We're going to start the webinar. Good day to you all. My name is Leanne Chuboff, Vice President of Technical Affairs with SQF, and welcome to our latest SQF 360 webinar, Vertical or Process Audits, What to Expect and How to Prepare, presented by Eagle and led by our speaker today, Brad Rush. Brad has been an SQF auditor since 2019 and was named SQF Auditor of the Year in 2024, a well-earned recognition, and he even has the trophy to prove it. He's known for driving results and continuous improvement through supplier and quality management tools. Brad brings a sharp, organized, and practical approach to solving tough challenges, and he's always looking for ways to make things work better. I'm personally excited to learn from Brad today, especially as SQF prepares to introduce a vertical audit approach in our next edition. As always, we encourage you to join the conversation. The Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen is the best way to ask questions. Feel free to type them in at any time. And to get us started on the Q&A, I'll answer the one question that is probably on most everyone's minds: when will be the release of Edition 10? The release of Edition 10 is still pending. We are currently aiming for a late fall release, but we'll make sure we keep everyone, including our CBs, informed as timelines and impacts become clearer. So Brad, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction. We're going to hopefully advance some slides here. So I work for Eagle Certification Group, and this is kind of the intro slide that we have put together. I've been working for Eagle for the last 5 years as a full-time auditor. And Eagle's been around since 1994. They're a trusted provider of a third-party certification body, helping companies around the world to work on environmental quality, health, safety, and food safety management systems. And there's over 150 different auditors globally, and Eagle is a valuable resource for auditing and helping you guys through any potential challenges you may have become certified. It's a woman-owned certified business. And I have to do the shameless plug that Eagle is always looking for auditors. So if anybody has an interest in auditing and would love to work with Eagle, please reach out, and we can hopefully get you the information that you need to help you make the right decision before you do make that journey to become an auditor. Okay, so today's presentation, we're talking about process versus vertical audits, right? Some people may be familiar with process and vertical. Hopefully today we'll give you a little bit more in-depth detail around that, and then some of the things that are required once you're done with the audit, and how do you drive improvements with the audit findings. Whether it's an internal audit or an external audit, there's a variety of things that can be identified, and through that identification process, you could have findings, right? So how do you motivate your team to drive improvement? And then lastly, understand your team, and basically how do you sell the change or sell your change, right? If you have an audit finding and you need to motivate somebody in maintenance or maybe the plant manager, how do you do it? All that good stuff. Okay. All right. Process audits. The process audit follows a specific process, and it's generally an end-to-end across departments, right? So you're looking at, you focus on, just get here to my slide here. You focus on how the process works, right? And you're identifying specific things from end to end on that process. What's different? The main objective is to ensure that the process is both effective and in compliant with the requirements. And sometimes the scope is narrow, but it's deep, right? Um, and it can get into, the inputs, the activities, the outputs, um, and then controls to see how well everything works together. Okay. Pros for the process audit, you can track how a process flows across departments or functions. Some of the cons are you're zooming in on one process. Example, maybe you're looking at sanitation, labeling, which means some critical areas may be overlooked, right? Another pro is you reveal the disconnects between policy and execution, right? You may have a policy or a procedure out there that says, hey, this is the way it's supposed to be done. These are steps 1 through 4. And then when you get on the floor, you're verifying, hey, is that what the operator is doing? Are they following the procedure the way it's written? Another con could be processes don't operate in isolation. A process audit might miss how upstream or downstream activities affect the compliance. Um, if somebody's moving a work in progress from one area to the next, and they deliver a substandard product before it gets to the next section, how does that impact its downstream customer, right? Another pro is, for the process is how, helps to identify bottlenecks, redundancies in workflow. You may find, hey, you've got a 5-step process to produce, say, coffee beans, and you may find that 3 of the 5, they're doing the same thing, when in fact, really the 3rd step really only needs to do it. Maybe the first 2 steps don't need to. So that's kind of one of the benefits of a process audit. Another one of the cons is without strong training, audits can become superficial, and they're reliant on documentation, not following the true process. So the challenge is how, when you do an audit, any type of audit, is how do you connect the paperwork with what's happening on the floor? What's that process look like? And that's, like it says, that can be the disconnect. You can have a documentation that says, I need you to do these steps. When you get to the floor, it's being totally done totally different than what's stated. Okay, so audit process flow. And for process audits, you're looking at procedures, you're looking at documentation, SOPs, work instructions, policies. You're looking at all that good stuff. Any customer requirements, regulatory requirements. Are they certified organic? Are they certified ISO 9001? Or maybe kosher or halal. So those are all things that you're looking at when it comes to the procedures. And then you're also looking at inputs and personnel. You verify raw material, records, resources, and one of the things you have to do on your inputs is, if for personnel, is you've got to interview employees. You're looking at what do they understand, what can they tell you about the process, what they're supposed to do, most importantly, what they're supposed to do if something doesn't work or doesn't operate or doesn't produce the product that it's supposed to. What's their reaction to it? Other things for process, you look at equipment and tools, you look at calibrations, you look at preventative maintenance programs, you look at overall equipment. You're making sure equipment is properly designed and properly constructed to prevent potential contamination risks. And then you want to also look at the outputs. Are they producing good product? How do they verify they're producing good product? Is there a certain amount of testing that the operator does? Is there a certain amount of testing that the lab does? What's the frequency of testing? All that good stuff. And then the supporting programs, which we all know is the prerequisites, the sanitation, allergen, supplier approval, audit programs, trained auditors, all that good stuff. Okay, so process-based internal audits. You want to choose a process that is critical to food safety and quality. We talk about sanitation and cleaning. Those are some facilities can be a very critical process. Labeling, packaging, there again could be a very critical process if you have allergens, or maybe you're making something for a customer and they have allergens, or you just got to make sure everything is working correctly. Allergen control, we'll talk about that. That's another process. You see some of the FDA recalls that are out there. You're looking at labeling, you're looking at allergens, foreign material. That could be another process that you look at as part of the auditing process is how do they control foreign materials? If they have metal detection, X-ray, that could be a focus. Traceability is a big one. You want to make sure that if something were to happen, you want to have full traceability all the way back to what was being produced, what raw materials were being consumed, where they came from. You never know, because you may have a situation at your supplier, and your supplier may call you and say, hey, I need to recall this material because we contaminated it. Well, traceability is going to hopefully help you identify everything, where it's at, get a handle on it quickly. Temperature monitoring is another big one. There are some producers out there that are using temperature control. Could be a critical control point for them if they're doing pasteurization or vat pasteurization, batch pasteurization. That could be a critical process. These become your audit anchors. That's ultimately what it's coming down to, is you identify these things and you're looking at what's the scope, right? You want to define the scope up front, ensure the audit is focused and meaningful, and these would be areas that you could focus to basically start that anchor. Okay. This is an example of a turtle diagram for cleaning and sanitation. You can see on the left-hand side, we've got inputs. You've got all the different SQF codes over here. And we're looking at cleaning and sanitation. We're looking at training, looking at storage of materials, regulatory requirements, records, hand washing, right? Those are all inputs. And then next we go to the who, right? Who's doing the work? Is it the sanitation, sanitors, chemical handlers, CIP personnel? Pre-operational inspections, who's doing that? Is that a quality function? Is that a supervisor function? And then cleaning inspections, who's doing that, and so forth. The what, what's the equipment to be cleaned, the detergents, sanitizers to be used, the cleaning strength, that's probably the biggest, most important thing. And we kind of talk about that in the output. We're talking about concentrations, but you want a validation of the cleaning procedures on the outputs, verified concentration. Are they using the correct chemical? Do they understand, it's very common to go into a facility and you may see a hot process where they're using maybe a caustic type based material with an acid rinse. And then once they get past that process, maybe it's just a modified cleaner with a sanitizer, so you want to verify those things. Those are all part of the outputs. You're looking also at, again, training records, pre-op inspections. The where, you're looking at production areas, where chemicals mixed, where are they stored? Some facilities may have tank storage for chemical, or some may just have it, they're pulling it out a 55-gallon drum or maybe a 3-gallon carboy. So you want to understand where that's taking place and what's happening. And then the how and the when, document the cleaning, the methods, verifications. If they're using ATP swabbing, are they swabbing for verification? Are they doing allergen swabbing? There's a whole variety of different things that can take place. So this is kind of just a real high level view of cleaning and sanitation. And this was provided by SQF, and I think it's an awesome slide. I really like it. So, okay, process-based internal audits. Continuing on, once you've chosen your process to audit, the next step is linking that to the SQF code, right? So if you want to look at cleaning processes, you got the codes: cleaning, sanitation, 1125, maintenance, 1121. Some people may say, what's the big deal with maintenance and cleaning? Well, if they're going to tear a machine apart and maybe it's a direct food contact area, how are they going to clean and sanitize that when they're done with maintenance? Whose job is that? All those good things, right? So you want to map out the processes and what codes are relevant to the process that you're looking at, right? Verification, we're looking at 255, validation 256, training is 292. These are just some high level examples of how you link the process to the SQF code. Okay. Process-based internal audits. You really should understand how the process is performed on the floor. This is a big area of focus for me as an auditor, because sometimes, as an auditor, we got a million things going on, and we are go, 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 right? And sometimes we've got a list that we're working off of, or sometimes mentally in our head, we're saying, okay, this is the next step I need to get to, or the next process step, or whatever the case may be. And myself, and I know other auditors have to do this as well, as we're there for a very limited amount of time, whereas an internal auditor is there all the time, hopefully. um, and they may know their process better than we do, but as auditors, we got to stop and understand the process. We got to stop, take a deep breath, just kind of take it all in. And I encourage internal auditors to do that as well. If even if you're new to the process or the facility, or it's a new process for you, take time and understand it. There are some facilities that I go to where the practitioners maybe have been there for quite some time, um, and maybe they're too busy, just like the auditor, and they don't take time to understand the process. So that, I think the biggest thing is, if you have a process flow and you can look at the process, that helps you to identify what the key things are, and then what potential deviations can happen, right? If you're making a tub for sour cream, what are the things that could go wrong, if we're making that tub? Could it be, a short tub? The injection mold didn't fill properly, so you got bad product coming out. Maybe there's an embedded label in that container. What if the label doesn't get in there? What if the wrong label gets in there? Those are all things that you need to kind of think about and look at what the risks are, and also the inconsistencies. Um, and like I was saying, the deviations are the biggest thing. You want to interview the key personnel for that process. You want to understand, hey, Bob, what do you do if you get bad parts? A lot of times when you ask an operator, hey, explain to me what you're doing, um, they're more than happy to tell you, some a little bit more than others. But they're happy to tell you and share with you what they do and what they look at. Some people may have some anxiety and some issues, and they may not prefer to talk to somebody, but then that's how you understand your people and your process, right? You understand the person on the machine, and maybe even understand a little bit more about them as far as what drives them, what motivates them, and so forth. You could ask about training, you could ask about challenges, um, and then most importantly, what do they do if they get a non-conformance, or what if the machine stops, or what if they have a CCP and the CCP fails. Those are all parts of the questions that you want to ask. Okay. Review documentation. This is, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but you're looking at SOPs, you're looking at verification logs, you may be looking at chemical cleaning logs, um, corrective actions. What do they happen if non-conformance is generated? and or maybe they were producing bad product, and the product was held. What's their process? Can you look at records for that? You ensure the records are complete, accurate. If it requires the practitioner to do a sign off, as part of the review of the document, then it should be completed. It should be signed off. And if it's not, then those are behaviors that you want to catch and identify and drive improvement in. You also want to look at evaluating the process controls. Um, you need to show whether the process is in control, right? But also, is it proactive or reactive? That's probably the biggest thing. Are systems in place and controls in place to prevent something from happening? Or is it, oh, when something happens, we raise the red flag and stop everything, and then try and figure out why? Verification validation activities also is to be reviewed as part of that process audit. And you're looking at, okay, how did they verify the CCP works, or how did they validate the CCP works? Or even if it's a control point, we have some facilities we go into, they don't always have critical control points, but they may have a control point. Well, what are they doing to verify and validate those control points? Through their documentation, they have records, supporting evidence to prove that. Okay. Document findings. Um, some when we do audits, we're looking at, we have a specific checklist that we're looking for or looking at. When you do an internal audit, you can look at process specific checklists or audit form. And you're looking for, looking at the strengths, the gaps, any opportunities for improvement. These, I always tell people, if you identify nonconformance, you should have objective evidence to support that nonconformance. But also, it's always generally a good idea to support what good things are going on too, and then provide those objective evidence. You may say, hey, I looked at form blah blah blah, and the operator had it completed, it was complete, accurate, it was signed, you could show all those things, but looking at the form, we verified that something wasn't being done as the SOP documented or stated. So that's your gap. And then it could be, potentially how severe it is, could be a finding or it could be an opportunity for improvement. You want to assign and verify corrective actions, right? So when you have a nonconformance that's identified, the biggest thing is you don't want to just identify it and say, oh, well, I'm done. The audit's over. These are the 10 nonconformances that you've gotten. You want to make sure that those things are corrected, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about how do you motivate others on the team to get those corrective actions addressed in a timely manner to prevent any potential future nonconformances when it comes to some type of a certification body auditing your facility, whether it's SQF or can be ISO 9001, FSSC, all those good standards. But you just want to make sure that you identify things, correct them to prevent future things. And then you also want to make sure effectiveness and closure. That's the other big thing is you can say, I've got these 10 nonconformances. I need them corrected by Monday. Maybe not realistic. More of a team approach would be to say, okay, how are we going to work on this together? And we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. Okay. Vertical audit. When you look at vertical audit, it's unlike process audit. Vertical audit will follow the product or batch throughout the life cycle, right? From receiving through to shipping, verify compliance and traceability. The vertical audit overview focuses on a specific product batch, like I said, versus a process where it follows a product or an item through all stages of product and handling. The objective is to ensure end-to-end compliance, right? We talked about this in the process audit, cross-functional product focus, and then the steps being covered. We're looking at receiving, storage, production. The goal is to trace product end to end, like we talked about for the process. And then the scope can be broad, cross-functional. Vertical is especially useful in verifying traceability and ensuring controls and effectiveness across multiple functions. Okay, vertical audit. We got some pros and cons. The pros, it verifies the end-to-end compliance. Another pro is it strengthens traceability recall. We just talked about that. Vertical audits are really honed in on something specific, like if you choose that ingredient, raw material to make that finished product, where is it at, right? You want to look at everything from start when it was received all the way when it was produced to a finished product. And this helps you to identify gaps, right? And it supports your audit readiness. Cons for the vertical is, it can be focused only on a single product or process. And, the reminder, I guess, for everybody is that audits examine only the interaction relevant to the product in question, not every process in the facility. So, and cons, broader system gaps. They could be missed, right? Issues like inconsistent training, documentation gaps, policy misalignments. Those things could be potentially missed in a vertical audit. Some of the other cons, is the audit skill. The skill of the auditor matters when it comes to conducting this audit. Because you should have proper training, and you might, because you don't want to overlook critical interactions or intersections and misinterpret code requirements. So you want to reduce that could reduce the audit's effectiveness if you don't have proper training, which is what you want to avoid. Okay. So what does the process look like? One of the things that we were working on last week when we were looking at slides is, I said start at shipping, and a comment was made, hey, why wouldn't you start at, or why would you start at receiving? I'm sorry, it was vice versa. Why would you start at shipping and not receiving? And it's really kind of a combination of shipping and receiving. I don't know if Joe Wieland is on the call or not, or if he's listening, or if anybody knows Joe, but Joe was my trainer when I started at Eagle, and Joe taught me all about vertical audits, right? The method is you start at the end of the process and work your way back, right? So when I go into shipping and receiving, and this is hopefully going to be helpful for auditors that are going to be doing this, is you want to look at what raw materials are there, right? Example was a couple weeks ago, I was in a facility and they're making plastic containers, right? So we go to shipping and receiving, and what do I see? I see a tote of colorant, and I know the colorant's used to color the finished product, right? So I start asking questions about the product and trying to understand what that colorant goes into. Well, lo and behold, we turn around and here's a shipment of product that's getting loaded onto a truck that uses the colorant that we just looked at and we're talking about. So now I can make a connection. I've got a raw material to a finished product. Now, that raw material is not what was used in that finished product because it just came in. But I know that this green colorant is going to be used in this finished product. So I'm able to identify a finished product, and I know the green colorant goes into it. So now I can start the process of going after that green colorant if I want. Let's find where that green colorant goes all throughout the process. Let's find out what's in hand, what's being consumed, where it's consumed. Is it specifically to a machine? And we can start that process, right? You also want to work your way back into production and QA. Those are areas, they're producing stuff, they're testing stuff. So you want to look at the steps for quality assurance testing. This helps verify product is made accordingly, right? Labeling and packaging. When you review the labeling and packaging operations, you ensure compliance with regulatory compliance. And then shipping, finally, when you review the records to support the documentation for shipping, you're looking at batch records, testing results, traceability, confirmed everything is properly maintained and compliant for the product that's being produced, right? Okay, so for vertical internal audits, you select the product or process line, right? So you want to choose a representative product or process. Example, we say ready to eat, seasonal production, high risk products. Um, Once you identify the product or process, then you map the flow. It's always best to take the HACCP diagram and look at that process and how things flow to make that product. That allows you to get a clear visual, and helps the auditors to follow the product logically, and ensure that nothing is overlooked. So that's kind of the basic function of identifying that, and then hopefully you can develop your checklist and move forward from there. You'll always want to look at the mapping out, and like it says, that's kind of your audit backbone, is creating that map, which then allows you to create that checklist and then things that you can focus on. At each process step, you would identify the relevant SQF code. So example would be receiving. We look at approved supplier programs and incoming goods. You want to understand, when you're on the floor, what's the process to receive raw materials? What do you require? Is there a C of A? Do you have to do any testing? If it tests wrong, what do you do? Or if the C of A is incorrect, what do you do? Or if the truck isn't sealed, what do you do? What if the rail car is not sealed? What do you do? Those are all kind of things that you want to understand about the incoming goods. And then you also want to understand, how is this supplier approved? Now, the person on the floor is not going to understand that. They're probably just going to say, hey, I've got this list, and this list says they're on my list and they're approved, so I can bring them in. So you want to dig into a little bit more on that. Labeling, the big one, 261. You want to look at what's going into the label, who's approving the label, who creates the label, what happens if they have extra labels. Those are all things relevant to that. Sanitation, clean sanitation, that 1125, I could spend probably days on that, but that's just me. But these are examples of what you want to do: marry up the codes to the relevant process. Vertical internal audits. You want to, as part of the audit process, you want to speak to the operators. No matter what audit it is, you always want to speak to the operators, right? Um, as an auditor, you want to understand, can they tell you what they're supposed to do? And again, what happens if something goes wrong, or if it doesn't produce a good product, or they have a system failure, or a machine failure? What do they do, right? There's also other things too. You want to understand what the operator does if something doesn't look right from a GMP standpoint. Is there somebody in the facility that's not supposed to be there? What do they do? Those type things. You also want to look at quality. You want to understand what quality's testing, how often they're testing it, why they're testing it, and what happens if it's out of spec. Warehouse staff, you also want to interact with them and understand how they receive material, how they store it. If it's an allergen, does it go to a certain area? Supervisors in each process step, you also want to interact with them and understand what happens if John over at machine 12 raises his hand and says, hey, we're making bad product. What's the process? What's the supervisor have to do? Does he have to notify anybody? Does he stop the machine? Does he involve quality? Does he get, his boss involved? Those type things. Record review and observations, we're talking about all those wonderful things, looking at those logs, temperature charts may be required, will be looked at, cleaning records. That's another good area to focus on. And then observe practices in real time. This is, again, getting out on the floor, observing what's happening, and trying to align with what they're doing. Does it match with what the procedure says? And if it doesn't, then is that a non-conformance, right? Okay. So process and vertical audit content, we're looking at scope, for process can be narrow, focused on one process across the facility or organization, where vertical can be broad and follow one product or batch through all departments and process steps. If you start your audit and you identify that raw material and it's lot number XYZ, you say, okay, I want to see where everywhere XYZ went in the process. And then you start following, okay, it was received on such and such date, it went to production on such and such date, it went to machine number, blah, blah, blah. So you can start to focus and look at that path where everything went. Focus for process, evaluates how a specific process is designed and executed and controlled, where vertical assesses how multiple elements apply to the product's journey, right? So cleaning and sanitation, you saw we've got training, we got cleaning and sanitation as far as the SQF element. And you're going to want to look at, okay, cleaning sanitation, where does it apply in the process? And then training, where does it apply? Everybody should be trained, right, in some form or fashion to do their job. But then cleaning and sanitation, it may be somebody else is trained to do that because maybe that's their only job. So you want to understand that. Process audit can be deep into one process, where vertical can be broad across multiple function or many functions. Purpose for a process is to validate process effectiveness, whereas the vertical is to verify product traceability and compliance, right? So if you look at that the product as it's moving through the process on that vertical, is it in compliance every step of the way through the process? Okay. Common use for process audits are routine internal. Vertical is verification of product integrity and traceability. Again, we're talking about that traceability, right? An example would be for process audits, audit cleaning procedures. Vertical audit would be tracing a specific bag of salad mix, right? So you could see the process audit is kind of general, whereas the vertical is more specific, okay? Driving improvements with the audit findings. This is probably one of the biggest challenges, I think, for any auditor. Me as an external auditor, I get to come and tell you what you're doing wrong, and I don't necessarily get to hang out and see what you do to fix it, right? I just kind of give you the finding and say, see you next year, right? But when it comes to internal audits, whoever's conducting the internal audits and whoever's responsible for doing that is really kind of the key player, right? They're the ones that are going to hopefully motivate the team to drive improvement based on what's identified, whether it's internal or an external audit. You need to have people engaged and so forth, so things can get corrected quickly. The categorize a finding. You have a critical, major, minor. When we look at the process, you want to engage the process owners, right? Some facilities I go to are really, really good at saying, you know what, this is John's department. John's going to tag along with us because John needs to understand what you're seeing from the auditor perspective. If you're doing internal audits and you can get somebody for that department to tag along, absolutely. That's one way to help them visualize why it's wrong or why it's a non-conformance. It's sometimes better to do that versus just handing them lists and saying, hey, here you go, fix this stuff. And they don't understand what it is or why it's a finding and so forth. So you want to get those process owners involved as early as possible. And then for sure, when you do your root cause analysis, you want to have them involved, whether it's a 5Y or a fishbone, whatever your process is. And then you want to help them understand why behind the finding, right? If you have a non-conformance and you expect them to get it done, but they don't understand what it means or why it happened, the chances are is they may not give you the time of day, right? So you want to make sure you keep them engaged. Driving improvement with audit findings. People have always heard of SMART, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. If we reorder SMART to STRAM, S is be specific, T is trackable, right? R is relevant, A is attainable, and then M is motivating, right? There's a little bit different way of looking at the SMART. This is something that came out of some recent training. And I actually kind of like it because you want to be specific, you want to have it trackable, and you want it to be relevant because if none of those things are obtainable, then you can't really correct it. So there's definitely some good things in here in that slide there. Okay, so driving improvement with your findings, we talk about follow-up verification. This is one thing we're going to hopefully talk about here in a couple minutes. We got a couple minutes left. We was talking about personalities and how do you motivate other people. But you want to follow up and verify, right? Conduct effectiveness checks. You want to make sure, hey, they're doing it. If they change something or process procedure, people need to be trained on it, right? And not only they're trained, but then somebody has to go verify that they're doing it. Not only a week from now, but 6 weeks from now, or 10 weeks from now. Whatever your process is, you just need to make sure those things are verified, right? You could look at some people may put something on a KPI tracker, right? They may say, hey, we're having too many internal audit findings. One of our KPI goals is to reduce those, and maybe they, average 8 a month and they want to go to 5 a month, so that could be something you could find on a KPI tracker. And you want to document everything. You want to close the loop on all those non-conformances, right? Because that's how you're going to, improve and hopefully prevent those things from happening. Use your findings to develop training material, procedures, additional systems. And it doesn't necessarily mean if you find a nonconformance, oh, I got to create a new process. No, you don't have to. What you can do is maybe look at your audit checklist or something of that nature, and maybe you need to add something to it so that you capture that and you verify that. You want to track and trend. You maintain a central log of all your findings and nonconformances, whether it's a nonconformance log or I was just at a facility recently where they did an excellent job on trending their nonconformances. And that's something they looked at in the monthly management review. That's something that's perfect. That it makes everybody aware of what the issues are, and maybe they have a KPI that's built into that. Okay. The big challenge is motivating the process auditors, or I'm sorry, process owners. um, you want to find a way to frame the finding and or opportunity not cast blame, right? Use the we, not the you, right? Share the why. You want to make sure they understand why. The sooner you get them engaged in the process, the better off you can be, because they can understand why it's a nonconformance. And then you're kind of playing the auditor, but you're also kind of playing the educator in the process, which is um, really key. If you can educate the folks at the top of the ladder, you will, the plant manager, director of operations, they're a team player with you guys, and they will probably help you and make sure that you're going to be successful if they understand what the process is and why it's an issue. Okay, celebrate progress, right? I was at a facility not too long ago. They were doing really good. They developed some new KPIs. One of them was around internal auditing and findings, not only completing the internal audits, but also findings, as well as safety and a variety of other things. And they hit their quarterly KPIs, and they brought in an ice cream truck for everybody. So those are, I'm not saying you got to do that, but you need to celebrate those things, right? Um, and then make sure that you share the wins, whether it's in a company-wide meeting. They got one facility where they reward employees for continuous improvement, specifically around food safety. If they recognize something or put it on a sheet of paper, it goes to the food safety committee. Food safety committee works with the plant manager to say, hey, this is a great idea. That plant manager will call them up at the quarterly meeting, and he will give them a challenge coin. On one side, I think it has the SQF logo. On the other side, it has the company logo, and it's just an appreciation. They were recognized in front of everybody. They also get to turn that coin in for some free swag, like three free T-shirts or something like that. So um, they're celebrating, right? They're sharing that with everybody, and that's something you want to do. Um, Finance should be used as a coaching opportunity as well. Not only you're educating, you're coaching. We're going to kind of quickly move along here because I'm running out of time. Um, when it comes to a tool out there, it's called DISC, right? This is something that I use. Um, there are essentially four different type of personalities, right? We look at dominance, we look at influence, steadiness, consistent, and it's DISC is DISC is what it stands for. And when we're looking at key traits, dominance employees are typically direct and brief. They're very upfront. They want the big picture. Sometimes either these are plant managers, um, influencers. The eyes are ongoing, outgoing, sociable. Their communication. They communicate their motivation, optimism, glass half full kind of situation there. Steadiness is teamwork, patience, loyalty, and C, we're looking at the precise, reserved, rule focused, right? So they're the ones that are data driven. So if you've got one variable that's out, it's the product is out, and they may not understand. They're very data driven, and they're very, very data focused. Okay. When it comes to the different traits, the D, we talked about being direct, result focused, and effective. Avoid over explaining things. I's use conversational tone. Um, Collaboration. Be patient is S. Oops. And provide reassurance, emphasis. And then C is you want to offer detailed documentation. I guess the biggest thing for me, and the reason I put this in here is um, for you guys as auditors, you need to understand who you are. We all have different personalities. We've all been raised differently. And so we all have different things in our lives that shape us to who we are. Well, the first step is knowing who you are as an individual and how you interact with those other people. If you're an I or an S and you're interacting with a dominant person, what we want you to know is, hey, you may need to be a little bit direct and brief with them. Don't beat around the bush. Um, Give them the big picture. That's how you motivate them. If you kill them with statistics, a dominant personality is going to be like, you're wasting my time. So, um, so it's about knowing who you are, your style, and then how you coach that up. Three key takeaways that we want to talk about. Process visibility end to end for vertical audits. Follow the product batch through all stages of production, from raw material to finished goods. You also identify process gaps and risks by tracking the product through in full life cycle. Vertical audits reveal where errors, inconsistencies, and nonconformancies can occur. And then support traceability and recall readiness. These types of audits strengthen the traceability system and make it easier to respond quickly to a recall in event that a recall would happen, and hopefully it would never happen to anybody. But that's in a nutshell what we're looking at. Okay. Oops. All right. This is going to be our question.
Well, thank you, Brad. That was fantastic. I loved all of it, specifically even at the end with the closeout of corrective actions. It seems to be everybody does such a good job up until that point, and then we forget about
Mhm.
the last step. I think we're exhausted by the time we finish the audit, and then we forget about that
Yep.
last step. So good
Yep.
questions came in while you were talking, and I just want to start off by a few questions about if the recording will be available, if the slides will be available. Typically, that will be available by the next day. So it'll be, yes, you'll have a copy of the slides and the presentation. It'll be available hopefully by tomorrow. We'll see. No pressure on Cole, who's our producer in the background here. Okay, question number one. Is there a general template for corrective actions? Like, is there a template for corrective actions? I know our checklist has a somewhat of a template on it, but is there a
Mhm.
template or anything you would say you could recommend for establishing, let's just say, root cause and corrective actions? Is there a place somebody could go?
Um, if you do a Google search, you can generally come across something out there. American Society of Equality, ASQ, has a bunch of really good resources on corrective actions. They get into the 5 why, and tools to use to do corrective actions and to identify root cause. Um, and I would say probably the combination of those two, but I think probably ASQ, American Society of Equality, has the best uh, literature that I've seen. They may not necessarily have a full-blown checklist that you can just use, but they have some materials that will help you develop what you need to develop.
Excellent. So American Society for Quality, ASQ.
Mhm.
Just go on their website
Mhm.
and see some good things. Okay,
Yep.
another question. I know we have 7 minutes, so I'm going to try and get all these in. In a process-based internal audit, it was mentioned if there was a finding, it could be a corrective action or opportunity for improvement. And the question really is, I thought SQF was significantly discouraging opportunity for improvement. And kind of what's your take on that?
So we're talking about internal audits, and if you have an internal audit and you want to deem it as opportunity for improvement, that's fine. It's not an SQF audit necessarily.
Mhm.
Uh, when it comes to when we comes to us auditing you, we cannot do opportunity for improvements.
Mhm.
Um, so we're going to give you critical, major, minor. And that's going to be it. There are some facilities I go into, they do the same thing, critical, major, minor, but they also do OFIs. So it's really how you want to design your system. I will tell you though that when it comes to me auditing you, you will not get an OFI from me. So
Thank you.
mhm.
The next question is, when is it recommended to do a vertical audit? Or is there a part of the code you would recommend to do a vertical audit on, and then the other part to do a process audit on? Can you have do both, like a vertical and a process audit kind of a thing? Because I know in your table that distinguished the two, narrow
Mhm.
focus for
Mhm.
process, broader focus for vertical. So what's your take on that?
So for process audit, you may maybe I'll just start with it. So say example, you get a customer complaint, and that customer complaint is for a specific issue. Um, and maybe you start to go through that root cause corrective action process and you're not finding anything. Well, could you say, let's do a vertical audit? Let's look at that specifically. Maybe we know it's a raw material, or maybe we know it's a mold number or a mold that's making the product. Um, and then you could start to look at that. If it's a raw material, that's perfect. Say if it's a colorant or a resin or a coffee bean or a malt or corn, you could follow maybe that specific lot number all the way through to help narrow and get you something that can help with the corrective action for a customer complaint. Process audit, that's just kind of the general big picture. Process audit could be, those monthly GMP audits or monthly process audits that you guys would do. Um, so it, has applications in both. You can go process or vertical. The vertical, I think, is like it's going to get you from start to finish and specifically to an item, whether it be a raw material or a finished product, something of that nature.
That's a good point. I think I like the combination. If you see yourself trending in a particular area and need improvement in the area, process audit might
Mhm.
really be the ticket to really finding out kind of where you need to improve. Okay,
Mhm.
next question is kind of, that's exactly what you answered. Can I include both types of internal audits in my system? So focus on
Yep.
process and the
Yep.
product by alternating between each type of audit. It's not, I don't find
Yep.
it, the question is that counterproductive? And I wouldn't think so. Yeah.
No,
I
no,
think,
I would think I would encourage you to use both if you can,
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
I think you that helps you dive into your process further and identify any potential issues.
yeah. Okay, last question that I received is when an internal audit has a finding, is there a time frame requirement to review and take action? In 21 CFR 117.165 specifically, guidelines require records review within 7 working days. Is this required under SQF? So the corrective
No,
time
yeah,
frame.
yeah.
Yeah.
Corrective action is, here again, it's kind of around when you develop your program. It's what you deem to be, um, I guess, not only reliable but also effective, right?
Yeah.
So if you're hurrying up to get something done in 7 days, are you really going to get it done? I mean, you got to look at what's going on in the facility and so forth. Um, Generally, a lot of places I go, they'll put a 30-day, or a couple of facilities I go to, they'll do a 15-day. So they want an initial root cause within 15 days, and then they want the whole thing completed within 30 days. And so it's really depends on what you want to design. I can tell you, it's also about the knowledge and expertise of whoever's doing those, right? You may have somebody that's not relatively new, or I'm sorry, is relatively new. It may take them longer, right? It may say, okay, the company may say, we got to put a team together to focus on this. Well, maybe somebody's out on short-term disability and you can't get the team together. So that could delay some things. So you need to be realistic, right? You don't want to rush yourself to deliver something that's going to fail, and you don't want to make it so long that it's not realistic. I can tell you when it comes to when we identify nonconformance, we want a root cause corrective action within 24 days. Um, and we want that to be closed out and objective evidence provided. So, you know, could 24 days be the ideal number? Possibly, but it really comes down to what you guys want to design. The biggest thing is if you identify it, you have a process to fix it. How you fix it, you document it, and it's provided for the auditor when the auditor comes on site.
For SQF, closeout of nonconformances is 30 days. So from the last day of the audit. So that is our requirement. I don't believe that that is against any of the 17065 principles. So I think it's driven by the scheme owner, which would be SQF. So it is 30 days closeout from the last day of the audit. That's what our process is. And that is my last question. If you have any other questions, feel free to email info@eaglecertificationgroup.com, and I'm sure they'll forward them right to Brad, and Brad will get right back to you. Or you can do info@sqfi.com. That's our general email address, and they'll go ahead and forward that to the right persons here. So with that, Brad, I do want to say thank you very much for all the time and effort you put forth in this presentation and sharing all your knowledge with us. We really appreciate it. I know I learned a lot today. I'm sure everybody else did too. We have our next digital webinar or seminar on September 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern. It's What Good Looks Like, Approved Supplier Programs and FSVP. So I look forward to seeing you all on that webinar in about a week. So thank you all very much for participating. And Brad, once again, thanks so much for sharing all your knowledge on vertical and process audits. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.